Hi, folks, with Tacitus today at your Pushback channel. Thank you for joining this live stream. In this chat, I'd like to talk about, or really adding to a video from a little earlier on today, and this is about children or young adults rather, that stay at home until they're in their 30s or late 30s, still living with their parents. And I had a bit of an extra bit to go on that video, and there's been a couple of comments that have come in, so I'll address the parallel issue with the young adults and children staying with their parents until they're into their 40s, with the state of the economy in the West and the reduced number of opportunities in the West, employment opportunities and relative cost of living and so on. So let me talk about that, because some children are living at home because it is very expensive to leave. Now they could still leave, and they could have 3, 4, 5 roomies or something like that and share a place, but they're deciding that they can have a higher standard of living by doing nothing and just staying with the parents. So they're doing that, and lack of ambition and laziness obviously feed into that. In some cases, the reduced opportunity will instill in many children a sense of futility, and it's not completely misplaced. And a story that I've told before or mentioned before is the very first apartment that I rented as a young man was it was $22 a week. This is a 1-bedroom place. $22 a week furnished, and $19 unfurnished. So, and there was a 1-bedroom place, pretty compact, but it had a large garage with a very generous storage area. It was near walking distance to one of the main bus stops on the main bus route, and so on. So it had it was near walking distance to shops. So it was a pretty good place. And so now at that time the wages were $6,000 a year average, and so if you multiply the rent into the wages, then you get an idea of how much of the weekly wage was chewed up in paying rent. So about 20%, 18 to 20% of the weekly wage was paying rent. That was my own place. I wasn't sharing with anybody. Not at that point. I wasn't sharing with anybody. So now that exact same place just recently was up for rent, and it's $450 a week, or 448, I think it was, $450 a week, but the storage area is gone and the garage is gone. So you get like an open air parking spot for your car, but so that's it. You're getting quite a bit less now than you did. And given the compact place, if you had to store any stuff in it, you'd have to, you could barely fit it in. So it's definitely for people who haven't got much there. It's not furnished anymore. You have to bring your own furniture. So anyway, that's now if you look at the average wage today compared to then, and then look at the rent. The rent's gone up by over 20 times, but the wages have gone up by, depending on whose numbers you look at, between 10 and 11 times. So that means the rent is in effect twice as expensive in purchasing power terms, twice as expensive as it was back in when I first got that place. So you'd be paying double rent, and that pretty much feeds in across other real estate. It's twice as much, or more than twice as much, to buy a house now as it was then, and yet there are fewer jobs that are paying that sort of money. So there's been a reduction in the number of well-paying jobs, while at the same time there's been an increase in the cost of living. If you look at, say, the bread index, which is a decent idea of the cost of food, it's general, it's not exact, but it's a decent one. Food is overall about 25% more expensive now in purchasing power terms than it was back then. So now there are some differences there. Fresh food and so on is a lot more expensive, whereas processed food was very expensive back then, but it's on a relative basis less expensive now. So processed food is cheaper, relatively cheaper in purchasing power terms, whereas the fresh food, the good quality food is fresh meat in particular is much more expensive. So if you're looking at purchasing power terms, how far your paycheck will go on the average wage, which is, when you're looking at nearly half the American workforce is on less than the average wage. So they'll give you an idea to the purchasing power people have, and yet the higher costs they have to meet in terms of the essentials. Now, the non-essentials of life have gone down in price, like TVs, for example. The price of a good quality colour TV when I was a kid is about almost the same as a top of the range TV is today, like as in exact same amount of dollars. So it's in purchasing power terms, the cost of a TV has fallen by 80% or more. Also things like computers. The very first computer I got was, I think, $5,500. And for $5,500 now, you can get an absolute kick-ass top-of-the-range machine, but just as an entry-level machine, which was what, $5,500 got you back. Entry-level machine, you can get one for a few $100. So electronics, mass consumer electronics, those sorts of things have gone down in price. Motor vehicles about the same in purchasing power terms, but you get quite a bit more for your money than you got back then. But nonetheless, it's still sort of four wheels and an engine. So really the increase in costs of living are in energy. And, I remember paying 40 cents a gallon, or 35 cents a gallon when I was a kid. So if you look at the cost of that now, so energy is way more expensive than it was back then, and housing's more expensive. Electricity is more expensive, food's more expensive. So the essentials of life are all much more expensive than they were, but you've got to have them. Whereas the discretionary spending stuff, TVs and electronics and so on, that you don't necessarily have to have, they're a whole lot cheaper. So that's sort of the equation, the cost equation out there. So as children, say, leave high school. Remember, a lot of them that are still in high school wouldn't have made it through high school years ago. They would have been told, look, you're too stupid to make it through. You're not going to pass it. Go out and get a job in a trade or something else. Become a hairdresser or whatever. But instead, these kids are being kept at school, even get a job in a trade or something else. Become a hairdresser or whatever. But instead, these kids are being kept at school, even though academically and scholastically they're just not the business. They're being kept at school instead of going out and developing some sort of career or job situation. Then they're going to college, getting some useless bullshit, studies degree, gender studies, peace studies, black studies, all this sort of stuff. And they're not worth a pinch of shit, these degrees, but they're unless you get a job as a diversity officer or as a man-hating, white-hating person in the HR department. But aside from that, these people have acquired this huge debt. And it may not be much in the overall scheme of things, like $50,000 or something for 4 years at college. And you say, well, see, that's I guess not a whole lot. It's a whole lot more expensive than it used to be. But also they're earning their ability to exercise that earning power in any way is close to zero. They're still only getting a part-time job in the takeout chicken shop. That's all they're kind of going to get, and so they're going to be paying back that debt for 20 years, 25 years before that's all paid. So their life doesn't begin in terms of their own work and their own energies, their own earning capacity. That it doesn't begin until maybe they're 40 or 45 even. So as they look down the road, they see, well, shit, I'm not going to be a viable partner in relationships. I'm not going to be viable work-wise. I won't be able to save anything. So I've got to stay with my folks just to get by, just so I can pay off this debt. Now, it can work both ways. Some people will stay with their folks and they'll work very hard. They'll be not many, by the way, but they'll be very industrious and very conscientious. Every penny will go to paying off their debts. They're not going to go out and party. They're not going to They're not going to snort lines with their buddies down in the bar or get drunk and this sort of stuff. They're going to be really focused. And then if they are, and given they don't have to pay rent because they're staying with their folk, they can pay off these debts in a few years. These college debts, maybe within a certain doable space of time. Then they can go out and start their life. They're still in their 20s, but they've got by this stage work experience. They've cleared their debt. They're focused and industrious and very clear about where they're going. But let's be clear, it's the amount of jobs that pay enough in the West today. 1970, 70% of the jobs could afford a middle-class lifestyle. Today, it's less than 25%. In fact, if you're in some of the more expensive big cities like the San Franciscos and that sort of thing, you're looking at less than 10% of the jobs pay enough money to live that sort of existence. And a lot of the people that are managing just to squeeze in, they're living paycheck to paycheck. They're living like a fucking peasant in an agrarian peasant in a third world country. They're living hand to mouth. They get sick for a week, or in the gig economy, they lose their job for a week or so. They're screwed. They hit the financial wall. So there's a lot of high risk, high tension, high stress involved in getting out there and doing your own thing because there are so few well-paying jobs there. Now, another way around it is that you say marry someone who's also got a high-paying job, and then with your combined incomes, the relativities of the costs of living and the amount of expendable income, the equation then improves to a point where you consider, say, buying property. But even there, you can't afford children. So the people that are in that category that can afford that lifestyle, the property, the children, the whole thing, and do it with some degree of comfort, are maybe 2% of the working population. So it gives you an idea just how restricted it is and how few those opportunities are. Nonetheless, coming back to it's not like it's impossible, and by staying at home with the folks and becoming dissolute, if a kid isn't already, they aren't being challenged in the school, because they're studying and to try and get kids to work hard and do their studying and to try and achieve a degree of excellence. So they just don't give a shit. So they come with that attitude and they're hanging around the folks' place, and really, all they've got to look forward to is inheriting the folks' place when the folks die. And that's it. That's all they've got. And papers and white papers around about this is they're going to the Western government wipe your ass or anything like that. And so they're going to say, look, you have to sell give your house to one of the big financial players, not will, but possibly. And this is how I believe. This is my opinion of how it's possibly going to play out. Not will, but possibly. You've got to give your house to these guys. They then will pay you a retirement income, so you've got somewhere to live and you can keep the lights on and put food on the table. But when you die, that house becomes theirs. Your kids aren't going to get kept heavily depressed. The wages are kept heavily depressed there, which makes life even tougher and more difficult for the black people. The globalist propaganda machine and the media they control has been quite good at directing that anger and that hatred against white people. And so it was all those damn working class white people did it to you, which is, of course, absolute utter nonsense. It's the globalists that are doing to them, that are screwing them totally, and then trying to put it towards the white people. And the same goes for the immigrants as well. They're being encouraged and directed to hate white people, and even young white girls, in particular young white girls, are being radicalized to say, well, the reason you've got no future isn't because you're dumb and you couldn't give a shit at school, and because you got no skills and you won't get off your ass and work and you won't do a damn thing. It's not because, oh yeah, that's right, it's got nothing to do with what I sit on the lounge all day watching TV. It's those damn white supremacist patriarchal males that are holding me back. And then that first, you can see how the whole pot is brewing and how the cake is baking with all this radical bullshit and ideology, and it's not leading us to a good place, but it gives some sort of added insight into some of the challenges that maybe these kids are facing, that it is hard to get out there and do well for yourself, and they're deciding, well, why bother? If it's not going to be easy, why bother? And that's my take on things. You've been with Tassus today, your Pushback channel, and thank you for listening.